شباب المرحلة الثانية، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اليوم محاضرتنا عن الاناتومي of the mouth. The mouth, or another name, the oral cavity. This oral cavity extends from the lips anteriorly to the pharynx posteriorly. Here, the line of division in between the oral cavity and the pharynx is the oropharyngeal isthmus. Oropharyngeal isthmus. This is formed on each side by the palatoglossal fold. إذا تذكرون من المحاضرة السابقة, there are two folds. The anterior one is the palatoglossal fold and the posterior one is the palatopharyngeal fold that surround the palatine tonsils. Here, the palatoglossal fold, the anterior one, is what we call the oropharyngeal isthmus. يعني الحد الفاصل in between the oral cavity and the pharynx. Palatoglossal fold. So this is the oral cavity extending in between the lips and the oropharyngeal isthmus. The mouth or oral cavity can be divided, or its divisions. First, the vestibule. This is a slit-like space in between the lips and teeth, and the mouth cavity proper. The vestibule, this is the vestibule here, it's in the green color. Vestibule, this is a slit-like space extending in between the lips and cheeks, يعني تمتد ما بين الشفاه والخد, to the teeth and gum. It extends in between the lips and cheeks to the teeth and gum. It is a slit-like space. This vestibule, as we said, it have bounded by the lips and the cheeks. The cheeks are formed by this muscle, which is called the buccinator muscle. The buccinator muscle is supplied by facial nerve. This space, smaller space in between the cheek and the teeth, is called the vestibule. This vestibule communicates anteriorly through oral opening, and oral fissure with the exterior, and posteriorly behind the third molar tooth with the mouth cavity proper. يعني راح تكون الاتصال ويا الخارج through the oral fissure بالداخل مع oral cavity proper behind the third molar tooth. The mouth proper, this extends in between the teeth and the gum to the oropharyngeal isthmus. It have a roof and it have floor. As we can see here, the roof of mouth proper is formed by the palate, hard palate and soft palate, and the floor is formed by the tongue, anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and the mucous membrane reflected on the undersurface of the tongue to the floor of the mandible. The mouth proper roof, its roof is formed by the hard palate in front and the soft palate behind. The floor, its anterior two-thirds, is formed by the tongue and the mucous membrane from the side of the tongue to the gum of the mandible. This is the tongue, anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and the reflection of the mucous membrane to the gum of the mandible. Here on the undersurface, يعني على الجزء السفلي من اللسان, on the undersurface of the tongue, this is the inferior surface of the tongue. Here we can see a fold of a mucous membrane at the midline. It will connect the undersurface of the tongue in the midline to the floor of the mouth. This is called the frenulum of the tongue. frenulum of the tongue. This is a fold of mucous membrane, connects the undersurface of the tongue in the midline to the floor of the mouth. The submandibular duct on both sides of this frenulum. Here we can see there is a papilla, and in this papilla we have the opening of the submandibular duct gland. The submandibular duct of the submandibular gland opens into the floor of the mouth on the summit of a small papilla on either side of the frenulum of the tongue. هذه هي هذه الغدة اللعابية راح تكون on both sides of the frenulum of the tongue. Here we can see this is the parotid salivary gland, this is the submandibular and the sublingual gland. All these glands will open their duct inside the oral cavity. يعني عندنا مثلا parotid gland will open into the vestibule of the mouth against the upper second molar tooth in the vestibule of the mouth. وعندنا قلنا submandibular gland duct will open on both sides of the frenulum of the tongue. وتوقع عندنا sublingual fold اللي هي sublingual gland with the small opening on the floor of the mouth. What is the sensory innervation of the mouth? To the roof that is formed by the hard and soft palate. It is supplied by branches of the maxillary nerve, the greater palatine and the nasopalatine nerves. These are branches from the maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve. To the floor of the mouth, the lingual nerve is for common sensation. Common sensation معناها للpain والtemperature والtouch. Lingual nerve is a branch of the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. With the same nerve يعني نفس lingual nerve يحمل لي fiber اللي هي taste fiber travel in the chorda tympani nerve. يعني اكو جزء من lingual nerve نسميه chorda tympani nerve, which is a branch of the facial nerve. هذا chorda tympani nerve it is concerned with the taste fiber يعني اللي هو عصب التذوق. الcheeks راح تكون by the buccal nerve. Buccal nerve it is a branch of mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. As we said previously, buccinator muscle, regarded as one of the muscle of facial expression, it's innervated by the buccal branch of the facial nerve. And then in general, the sensory innervation of the mouth is supplied by branches of the trigeminal nerve اللي هي maxillary والmandibular. هذه الصورة تراوينا أنه this part اللي هو راح نقول roof of the oral cavity is supplied by branches of the maxillary nerve اللي هي incisive nasopalatine and the greater palatine nerve. والcheeks والfloor of the mouth supplied by branches of the mandibular nerve. صورة ثانية, this is the roof of the oral cavity or roof of the mouth. Sensory innervation of the mouth is supplied by the nasopalatine nerve and the greater palatine nerve. Both of these nerves are branches of the maxillary nerve. And the cheeks يعني منطقة الخد ومنطقة floor of the mouth is supplied by the lingual nerve and the buccal nerve. Both of these nerves are branches of the mandibular division of trigeminal nerve. Now we come to another item, which is the tongue. The tongue is a mass of striated muscle or skeletal muscle that is covered with a mucous membrane. It is divided into right and left half by a median fibrous septum. We can see in this figure, this is the tongue. It is a mass of striated or skeletal muscle. It consists of from two halves. They are connected in the midline by a median fibrous septum. The tongue can be divided into anterior 2/3, which is called the body of the tongue, and a posterior 1/3, which is called the base or the root of the tongue. The tongue can be divided by a V-shaped sulcus called sulcus terminalis, this is a V-shaped sulcus terminalis, into anterior 2/3 and the posterior 1/3. The anterior 2/3 contain these villi, different type of villi, but the posterior 1/3 is devoid of these villi. Instead, it have a collection of lymphoid tissue that is called the lingual tonsils. Here we can see this is the V-shaped sulcus or terminal sulcus of the tongue, or sulcus limitans. At its top of the V there is a small pit that is called foramen cecum of the tongue, and this sulcus limitans will divide the tongue into anterior 2/3 and a posterior 1/3. And here we can see that the anterior 2/3 covered with papillae, while the posterior 1/3 is covered with the lingual tonsils. The tongue is attached superiorly to the styloid process and to the soft palate by the styloglossus muscle and by the palatoglossal muscles. And below it is attached to the mandible through genioglossus muscle and to the hyoid bone through hyoglossus muscle. So it have a upper attachment and it have a lower attachment. Above it's attached to the styloid process and soft palate, and below it's attached to the mandible and the hyoid bone. The muscle of the tongue can be divided into two types, the intrinsic and the extrinsic. Intrinsic muscle that form the substance of the tongue. Intrinsic tongue muscle is formed by longitudinally oriented longitudinal muscle, and we have transverse muscle, and we have vertical muscle. These muscle it will form the substance of the tongue, and it is responsible for the changing the shape of the tongue, and during movement of the tongue to change the shape of the tongue. They are supplied by the hypoglossal nerve. The extrinsic tongue muscle اللي هي قاعد نشوف عندنا هنا الجينيوغلوسس، الهايوغلوسس، styloglossus and the palatoglossus. These are extrinsic tongue muscle. Also they are supplied by the hypoglossal nerve. What is the blood supply to the tongue? The main blood supply is through lingual artery, which is a branch of the external carotid artery. Another branch is that comes from the tonsil, a branch of the facial artery, and the third is from the ascending pharyngeal artery. All these arteries are branches from the external carotid artery. What is the lymphatic drainage of the tongue? هنا الليمفاتيك درينج يختلف according to the region. الأهمية هنا أنه عندنا ال tip of the tongue, it will be drained to the submental node that lie in the submental triangle of the neck. إن ال sides of the anterior 2/3 هذه sides of the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, it will be drained to the submandibular and the deep cervical lymph node. إذا من البداية كان عندنا tip submental lymph node, side of the anterior 2/3 to the submandibular and the deep cervical lymph node, وعندنا أخير ال posterior 1/3, this is in the green color, will be drained to the deep cervical nodes. What is the nerve supply of the tongue? It is important. It have two type of nerve supply. One, this is for the sensory, and the another is the motor. The motor supply is through hypoglossal nerve, اللي هو 12 cranial nerve, to supply all the muscle of the tongue for the movement. And the sensory nerve supply is through a lingual nerve. It will provide sensory supply اللي هو general sensation و special sensation. شوف هنا انه sensory innervation of the tongue, the anterior 2/3 through lingual nerve. Lingual nerve is a branch of the mandibular division of trigeminal nerve اللي هو general sensation. With the lingual nerve we have another nerve called chorda tympani, which is a branch of the facial nerve that is responsible for the taste, يعني التذوق. posterior 1/3 راح يكون supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve اللي هو 9th cranial nerve, هذا for the same nerve for the general sensation يعني pain, touch and temperature sensation, and the tastes. يعني glossopharyngeal nerve it will contain both fiber for general sensation and for the taste. وقاعد نشوف هذا المخطط انه قاعد يحدد لي انه هذا sensory innervation of the tongue. اكو عندي جزء يعني التيست واكو عندي somatic sensation. taste يعني تذوق الأطعمة. والsomatic sensation general sensation يعني for the pain, temperature and touch يعني إحساس بالألم والحرارة واللمس. هنا عندنا somatic sensation أو general sensation anterior to third through the lingual nerve اللي هو branch من mandibular nerve. والposterior one third قلنا through glossopharyngeal nerve. التيست عندنا posterior one third through glossopharyngeal nerve وقلنا anterior two third through chorda tympani اللي هو branch of facial nerve. إذا نجي هنا للجلوسو epiglottic fold أو fossa والvallicula and this region supplied by the vagus nerve. هذا في المخطط الثاني يوضح لنا sensory innervation. الموتور نيرف احنا منتهي من عندنا الموتور نيرف is through hypoglossal nerve. السنسر innervation مثل ما قلنا عندنا الانتيريور تو ثيرد through lingual nerve اللي هو general sensation والكوردا tympani اللي هو special sense والposterior one third through glossopharyngeal nerve اللي هو general and special sense. What are the movements that are possible of the tongue؟ عندنا أول شيء protrusion. It means the movement of the tongue anteriorly forward. Protrusion it is done by the genioglossus muscle on both sides acting together. Genioglossus. A retraction it means movement backward. حركة اللسان إلى الخلف it is done by the styloglossus and the hyoglossus muscle on both sides acting together. Depression it means movement downward. It is done by hyoglossus muscle on both sides acting together. retraction and elevation يعني حركة إلى الخلف وارتفاع مع الارتفاع retraction and elevation of the posterior third by the styloglossus and palatoglossus muscle on both sides acting together. وعندنا أخيرا ال shape changes as we said before. تغيير الشكل is by the intrinsic muscles يعني هي longitudinal transverse والhorizontal. Now we come to another item which is the palate. The palate, as we can see here, this is the palate which form the roof of the oral cavity proper and the floor of the nasal cavity. It is formed anteriorly by the hard palate and posteriorly by the soft palate. Here we can see this is the palate forming the roof of the oral cavity. As we said, anteriorly it is formed by a bone and posteriorly it is formed by soft tissue. Anteriorly hard palate and posteriorly soft palate. This is the hard palate formed by the bone and attached to its posterior end is the soft palate. The hard palate here we can see it is formed by the palatine process of the maxilla anteriorly. Posteriorly it is formed by the horizontal plates of the palatine bone. It is continuous behind يعني هنا continuous behind with the راح تكمل عندنا soft palate. The soft palate here, this part that's attached to the posterior end of the hard palate. This is the soft palate. It is a mobile fold. هذه هي soft palate. Mobile fold attached to the posterior border of the hard palate. It's a free posterior border present in the midline a conical projection. هذا النتوء اللي هو شكله مخروطي. We will call it the uvula. From the free posterior border of the soft palate we have this conical projection that is called uvula. The soft palate is continuous at the side على الجوانب with the pharynx, with the pharyngeal wall. How? This is the conical shape projection of the posterior border of the soft palate, which is called the uvula, and the soft palate is continuous on the side with the pharyngeal wall through the palatoglossal fold and the palatopharyngeal fold. This is the uvula in the midline. These are the palatoglossal and palatopharyngeal arches or fold. They are connecting in between the soft palate and the pharyngeal wall. What are the muscles of the soft palate? How the soft palate can move, moving up or down. It have certain muscle. The most important of these muscle is the tensor villi palatini. This one, from its origin, then it will arch over the hamulus of the pterygoid process. This is the hamulus of the pterygoid process. نشوف انه هذه العضلية tensor villi palatini ملتفة على this bony projection, which is the hamulus of the pterygoid process, to go to form the aponeurosis of the soft palate. This muscle is called tensor villi palatini. Another muscle, tensor villi palatini, it will causes the soft palate to become tense. راح تشد soft palate. Another muscle, which is the levator villi palatini, that it will elevate the soft palate. Another muscle is called the palatoglossus muscle to the tongue, and from the palate to the tongue, palatoglossus muscle. And another one is the palatopharyngeus muscle, from the palate to the pharyngeal wall. And in the midline we have the muscle that form the uvula, called musculus uvuli, that form the conical shape projection from the posterior end of the soft palate. That's called musculus uvuli. What is the nerve supply of the palate? It is supplied by branches from the maxillary nerve. These are the greater palatine nerve and the nasopalatine nerve, branches of maxillary division. What is the blood supply of the palate? Also, it's through the greater palatine artery mainly. Also, it is a branch of the maxillary artery. Thank you.